Oh yeah!
Just a quick disclaimer here before I begin on this video. Everything said from here on out is of course allegedly and is all for entertainment purposes, okay? Nothing is to be taken literally. In fact, don't ever take anything anyone says as the gospel. Always do your own research and use your own critical thinking when coming to conclusions on things. Like I said in the Owen Hart video, which you can go back into the channel archives and watch after this one if you haven't already. I just want to throw out these concepts. These very obvious proofs, at least in my opinion, that the deaths of all of these good-hearted, extremely talented men are not what they seem. I want to get that out to others so they can ponder on those concepts and proofs, in my opinion. Some of the things I'm going to say will also get really out there at times. So if you don't have an extremely open mind, please do not continue. I want you to be able to still enjoy the many other forms of pro wrestling content that I work very hard on and offer here on the channel. And I also want to avoid criticism and negativity in the comments section. But having said all of that, guys, let's dig into the deaths of both Chris Benoit and his best friend Eddie Guerrero, two of the most sudden and tragic losses in pro wrestling history. Chris being the single most tragic of all time, I would say. There's a whole lot going on here, guys, and it starts all the way back in 1996 during Chris Benoit's time in WCW. The real-life drama of Chris Benoit having an affair with fellow on-screen performer as well as staff member Kevin Sullivan's wife, Nancy, known on air as Woman, leading to the couple's separation as Nancy left Kevin for Chris, was made into an actual on-screen feud. One of the most brutal and seemingly personal ones. No man, it was the most personal and brutal feud I had ever seen in pro wrestling as a young kid watching it unfold. I mean, even then, the thing seemed eerie. Sullivan's whole devil worshipping shtick and all of the Freemason signs he loved to throw up threw up red flags for even kiddo me, so I was already kinda leery of the guy. What really threw me off back then was a promo from Arn Anderson that they aired on TV. Anderson, who was Benoit's on-air partner, mentor, stablemate, came off as extremely stern and serious as a heart attack, warning Benoit of serious repercussions of his life decisions to screw with Kevin Sullivan's life and his family. He says rule number one of the business is to not mess with a man's family, I think it was. Arn said, and everybody's looking for woman and can't find her. So he assumes she's in Italy or Germany or wherever with Benoit, something like that. Again, even as a young kid watching this, right, I'm thinking, why in the fuck is Arn Anderson searching around with Kevin Sullivan for his wife? Isn't Chris Benoit a horseman? The honest truth is, that promo, it aired as a legit public warning to Chris Benoit, I believe. A lot of people lately are pointing out and going back to that promo for proofs on the Benoit story, and rightfully so. We all know now he sure didn't he didn't heed that warning of old Arn's, did he? Of course, we also know now that while I haven't personally heard anything about Arn, Kevin Sullivan is a high-ranking Freemason by all accounts from insiders in the business. And Arn probably is too with how offended he seemed in that promo. Along with many others, if not most of the locker rooms back in the day, guys. Probably mostly Freemasons. You know, it was a hell of a ballsy move taking the wife of not only a coworker but a supervisor. And that supervisor being a high-ranking Mason at that. I mean, oh, Chris Benoit was one gangster, wasn't he? This mistake, as I believe Arn put it in that televised warning of his, would end up costing Chris Benoit his life. Yes, that's right. I don't believe Chris Benoit killed his family. And if he did, it was because, or rather, it definitely wasn't because of CTE, like Vince McMahon and the media would like for you to believe. And like Chris Nowinski's been paid to push through yearly contributions to his charity. Don't get me started on charities. And this is all allegedly, again. No, it definitely wasn't CTE. If it wasn't a hitman or more than one hitman and a cover-up, it was most likely Chris was MK Ultra'd and made to do it, which would explain the super weird, eerie, and foretelling promo as he stood bloodied and crazy-eyed saying his family won't be watching Raw next week because he's going to do something crazy, right before he allegedly murders them. Now see, that's one time I can use allegedly and actually mean it in this series. Moving on. This mistake would follow him over to WWE, where fellow high-ranking Freemason Vince McMahon would follow through and help carry out the assassination of Chris Benoit, Nancy, and their young son. I don't buy into the rumors about their son actually being Vince's. Am I going to completely rule it out either? Of course not. Vince is really fucked up. He's really fucked up, guys. We talked a good bit about predictive programming in the media, and especially the WWF/WWE for some reason. Yeah, Vince loves using that stuff. Let's start diving into the predictive programming used for the Benoit family murder, as well as Eddie Guerrero's too, shall we? When it comes to both Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, I think it would be safe to say that the most memorable moment from either one of them, and also one of the greatest moments in WWE history ever, if you ask me, is the end of WrestleMania 20, where the two emotionally embrace, both finally victorious and both world champions together after two long, hard careers, side by side through most of them. But there is a shitload of symbolism going on here, and predictive programming, once you have the eyes to see it. The WrestleMania 20 logo being two X's, an X symbolizing death, sacrifice. Throw in the Arn Anderson promo from WCW all the way back in 1996, as well as the unhinged Benoit promo right before the tragedy, because we've already covered those. And if we just had those and the two X's on the logo for WrestleMania that, the WrestleMania that defined both of those guys' careers, well, I would maybe be willing to take an L if you claimed I was reaching, but let's add to that the WWE used their yearly video game franchise at the time, SmackDown vs. Raw, in back-to-back years for predictive programming. Both games having stories in them with The Undertaker, where Eddie Guerrero is thrown into a casket, and then the next year, Chris. Both times released the years those men died. And in Eddie's case, the game released a mere days before his tragic death. Speaking of Eddie, we really haven't spoken much on him in this video so far, but there's just so much more going on with Chris here. If you ask me, and what my current viewpoint is on the Eddie Guerrero murder, yes, I said murder, Another sacrifice, blood on the hands of Vince McMahon and several others. If you look into people involved there, Chavo Guerrero's stories have changed at least once or twice over the years as he took part in covering up Eddie's murder. Vince McMahon used it for a ratings pop, mainstream attention, and to milk every last dime he could out of poor Eddie's legacy with merch like armbands. Come on, guys. How long did people like Chavo and especially Rey Mysterio go out there with EG armbands and milking his name for their own gain? Did anyone else not find that tacky, disgusting, and obvious? If you're curious how I think it was carried out, look up the heart attack gun the CIA are notorious to use. There's tons of young celebrities that died too soon at the hands of that thing. I think the same weapon took out Ultimate Warrior. Now, I think Chris was the main reason that murder was carried out. I want to make that clear. Go look at the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Benoit and how much everyone makes it clear that Eddie's death tortured Chris. I'm sure Chris blamed himself and grieved constantly. That's about all I have to say on Eddie's death. There's not nearly as much out there on Eddie and Eddie's murder, alleged murder, I better say that again, and all for entertainment purposes here, remember, as there is Chris. And again, I think it's because it all really ties back to Chris and that those choices he made in 1996 really did seal his fate. Oh, hey, I said earlier, if Chris did physically do it himself, I think he was under MK Ultra. And we're going to go deep down the crazy rabbit hole here, okay? But that's exactly what Donald Marshall believes happened. Donald Marshall is one of those dudes that are just really out there, okay? He claims he's responsible for writing many popular songs over the past several decades for many of the biggest artists of all time. And his life has been spared due to his talents, even with his outspoken, rebellious nature online. He claims he's been inside the cloning labs many, many times. He's been cloned himself and tortured. His clones killed to physically harm him. It's just, you've got to read the man's story, if only for shits and giggles, and you don't believe a word of it. I had success using Dogpile as my search engine and just searching Donald Marshall. For Chris Benoit specific stuff, I just added Benoit's name into the search at the end after Marshall's. But if you listen to Donald Marshall and you read what he has written online, he mentions the stuff with Sullivan and that Sullivan is a handler in the business, entertainment business, and he's big time involved in the cloning trade. He says Benoit's beef didn't end there, however, and that he also had a situation with the fat member of ICP. What's his name? Violent J? Is that the one? Well, Violent J comes from a privileged family, is a complete fraud, and is only in entertainment because of said family. Allegedly. Violent J and Benoit had a scuffle at the cloning facilities one time, according to Marshall, because Violent J made a remark about he and Benoit both being high caliber athletes and wrestlers. Benoit scoffed and something to the effect of called him a talentless fat asshole that is only in wrestling because of his family, while he had to bust his ass to get into the business. He then took Violent J down to the ground and made him cry in front of everyone with a shoot submission. Want some kind of proof that may be legit? I'll give you some damn good proof it's legit. Go check out ICP's up Chris Benoit song and video. Watch the stupid music video and tell me that isn't satanic and celebrating Chris Benoit's death. Now, why in the would you even mention? Why, no, why would you name a song Chris Benoit in 2012 for any reason than to laugh at his death? Look, I'm getting way off track here with this all. Donald Marshall is a pretty far out topic, and I don't want to run people off. I mean, he even suggests the Queen of England and William Regal, a drug runner for the crown before his wrestling career, were involved in killing the man. Part of me wants to give all of this stuff validity, but I'm still somewhat on the fence. It's the ICP stuff that almost has me sold, man. And Regal's weird behavior in his interview on the Benoit tribute show. Yeah, yeah. Regal's demeanor is another thing that triggered me even as a kid watching it live. So, yeah, I guess do some research on Donald Marshall, everyone. Probably about the best thing you can do towards finding the deepest truths. The bottom line is flat out, Chris Benoit was framed. There's too many interviews and little clips of Benoit and others noting how calm, professional, and nice the man was all the time. And something that extreme and gruesome, in my opinion, doesn't come out of thin air suddenly. I'm sorry. Say what you will. Oh, let's not forget to add that their neighbor, who is extremely sus in the already extremely sus investigation that was closed unprofessionally and much, much too soon, is now proven to be a family friend, if not cousin, of Kevin Sullivan. Oh, also, speaking of William Regal and Donald Marshall's claims against him, word is he was also discovered stopping by the house around the day of or shortly before the murders took place. Man, come on now. If the writing isn't on the wall, if your third eye isn't open enough to see that the spoon-fed narrative is full of holes and complete nonsense, then I don't know, man. Just keep watching my channel. I'll get you there. But to end this episode of the Conspiracy Series, I would just like to say once more, Vince McMahon is an evil man.